Right friends, welcome back to Learning Space. This is Economic Survey, an overview. Friends, as far as Economic Survey and Union Budget is concerned, we are going to produce all the requisite modules within a week. That means all these modules will be presented before February 6th. Overall, we are planning 8 modules pertaining to Economic Survey and 3 modules pertaining to Union Budget, and all these will be presented before February 6th. This is the first module. You can say introductory module or an overview of Economic Survey 2020-21. What exactly you understand by Economic Survey? Economic Survey is nothing but the present state of various sectors of the economy. How various sectors of the economy are faring during 2021? What are the headwinds? What are the prospects as we go forward? What are the suggestions for the government? All these are reflected in the Economic Survey. This is the document prepared by Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India, and this is presented to Parliament by the Union Finance Minister. It is a regular exercise before Union Budget every year, and this Economic Survey is titled 2020-21, whereas Union Budget is titled 2021-22. The difference is this Economic Survey primarily talks about how various sectors are faring in this particular financial year, whereas Union Budget talks about budgetary proposals for the next financial year. That is the basic difference. That's why Economic Survey is titled 2020-21, whereas Union Budget is titled 2021-22. That is another difference. Right friends, let us look at an overview, or you can say I would like to discuss for around 20 to 25 minutes with regard to the brief about Economic Survey. There are around 15 to 20 points. I would like to be brief on all these points, and detailed explanation and detailed discussion of various aspects will take place in the next 7 modules. Topic by topic we are going to cover from module number 2 to module number 8. So friends, module number 1 is brief. Let us look at the first aspect. This is with regard to V-shaped economic recovery. Quite often in recent times, people are talking about V-shaped economic recovery, base effect. These two words are in the news. Students must have clarity with regard to what is V-shaped recovery. It is nothing but just understand this line. What exactly is this line? Just look at this point. This point is the economy of 2019-20. That means GDP of 2019-20. What was the real GDP of 2019-20? It is around 146 lakh crores. Please listen carefully. If you look at real GDP of 2019-20, it is 146 lakh crores. And this year, that is 2021, the economy is going to contract by around 7.7%. Because of that, what happens? The real economy or real GDP will go down to around 134 lakh crores of rupees. That means it is going down from 146 to 134 lakh crores of rupees. And just remember this point. Right, now what happens? In 21-22, there is going to be 11% GDP growth. Just listen carefully. In 2021-22, that means in the next financial year, there is going to be 11% GDP growth. Because of that, what happens? This Indian GDP in 21-22, that is going to become 149 lakh crores. So that means here. So what happened? The economy contracted sharply, and after that it recovered sharply. This is nothing but V-shaped recovery, which you normally see in the newspapers, right? So friends, in 2019-20, 146 lakh crores of real GDP, that became 134 lakh crores of real GDP, and because of swift recovery, it became 149 lakh crores after 21-22 financial year. So friends, this is called V-shaped recovery. Second important aspect is base effect. Here you see the economy is going to increase by 11% in 21-22 over lower base. That means this has fallen from 146 to 134. So therefore the base became lower. So therefore 11% recovery, that is considered primarily because of base effect. The base has fallen down. That's why the recovery appears huge. That is 11%. And just think over one more point. Here you see in 2019-20, it is 146 lakh crores. And 21-22, that means after 2 financial years, it is 149. That means in real terms, what happened? In 2 years, the real growth is around 2.4%. In 2 years, the real growth is 2.4%. That means it is from 146 to 149. Here you see it has gone down from 146 to 134, recovered to 149. That means the real growth in 2 years period, that is from 146 to 149. That means it is just an increase of around 2.4% in 2 years. So students must have clarity with regard to two things. One is a V-shaped recovery, and the second one is with regard to base effect. Though in 21-22, the growth is going to be 11%, but the biggest problem here is lower base. The growth is over lower base, though it looks 11%, but in real terms, within 2 years of time, the economy has grown by just 2.4%. I hope you got clarity with regard to V-shaped recovery of economy. Right. And here you see the economy is contracting by 7.7%. That means right from 146 to 134, this is minus 7.7%. Right. Then here agriculture will see 3.4% plus. And services and industry, they are going to contract by around 8%, 9%, something like that. Right. And the next one is why this V-shaped economic recovery is happening. As per economic survey, V-shaped economic recovery is happening because of massive vaccination drive. 1 million people were vaccinated within just 6 days. Not only that, here you see fast recovery in services sector, and it is substantiated by, that means how can you say that the V-shaped recovery will take place? Because of the simple reason, various indices like power demand, rail freight, e-way bills, GST collections, all these signify that there is going to be V-shaped recovery. Then India will have current account surplus of 2%. Friends, in 2021, we are going to see current account surplus. Always you see current account deficit. In fact, current account surplus in a financial year happened around 17 years ago. This year, we are going to see current account surplus. This is positive news as far as the country is concerned. And another important aspect is why this is happening. Because imports have fallen much faster than the fall in the exports. Exports have fallen maybe around 5-6% or so, but imports have fallen much faster. Because you see, if you look at India, in between for several months, crude oil demand was not there. And the second one is gold demand reduced substantially this year. These and because of various other reasons, imports have fallen drastically in comparison to exports. And that is one of the reasons why we are seeing current account surplus after 17 years. Then net foreign portfolio investment inflows, they are increasing, and because of foreign portfolio investment inflows, the stock market is soaring high. Stock market touched 50,000 mark, and on the other side economy is contrasting by 7.7%, but at the same time stock market is soaring to record highs. That is primarily, or you can say one of the reasons is record foreign portfolio investment flows into the Indian stock market. Look at the next one. Interstate disparities across rural and urban areas, as the laggard states in fact gained relatively more. The laggard states, the states which were behind, their growth rates increased in comparison to other states. Because of that, there is in fact interstate disparities declined. Another important aspect is after global financial crisis of 2008, this regulatory forbearance. What is the meaning of forbearance? That means regulatory actions are paused, or you can say regulatory actions in certain times they are paused or they are kept in status quo position. Just you look at insolvency and bankruptcy code. It is now kept on hold for around 1 year. That is, you can say regulatory forbearance, or you can say holding back regulatory actions. These are required sometimes, but economic survey says holding back regulatory actions, these are required. After global financial crisis of 2008 also, this regulatory actions or regulatory forbearance or holding back regulatory actions, that was necessary, but for around 7 years regulatory actions were not there, proper actions were not there. Because of that, banks bad loan crisis we are seeing subsequently. Here you see forbearance continued long after the economic recovery, and subsequently, or you can say during this period of time, evergreening of loans, window dressing of loans, they tried to keep the problem under the carpet. So the message, underlying message is, after difficult times, regulatory forbearance or holding back regulatory actions may be required, that they should not be more than the required period. If they continue for more than the required period, the country suffers. The country suffered during the past 4-5 years because of the bad loan problem, because this regulatory forbearance that was continued for longer period. Right. In India, still it is a problem to do business in India. In India, it takes about 1600 days to close a company, even if all the papers are fine, whereas in Singapore, it is just 128 days. The biggest problem in our country is over-regulation. There is complexity in regulations. The discretion given to the officials, that is less. Then PMJAY made a huge difference. That means it compared various indices as far as the infant mortality, as far as stunting, as far as wasting. Such type of indicators are compared, and various health related indicators are compared between West Bengal and Bihar, Assam, Sikkim on the other side. That means it made a point that in the states where Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana is implemented, there is a substantial increase, or you can say there is a substantial improvement in various indicators in comparison to states like West Bengal, which have not implemented Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana. Then an increase in public health care. Friends, public health care, both the states and center put together, that is 1.3% of GDP. That means the government expenditure on health care, that is 1.3% of GDP, out of which 2/3 comes from states, 1/3 comes from center. All of you are well aware about it. What the economic survey says, if this is increased up to 2.5 to 3% of GDP, then there is every possibility out of pocket expenditure. Please don't forget, at present out of pocket expenditure is 60 to 65%. That means if 100 rupees is the health cost, health care cost, then 60 to 65 rupees is going from our pockets. Remaining maybe through various means like insurance, government support, other things. So friends, at present 60 to 65% is going from out of the pocket, and that is putting millions of people into poverty. And if the healthcare expenditure is increased to 2.5 to 3% of GDP, then out of pocket expenditure can be reduced to 35% of the overall healthcare spending. It is a valid point. Then COVID-19 showed that how a health crisis can transform into economic and social crisis. All of you are well aware, right? This is talking about National Health Mission that played critical role in certain childhood related aspects like prenatal, postnatal care and institutional deliveries. It is batting for regulator for the healthcare sector. That means there is a need for regulator for healthcare sector so as to prevent information asymmetry. That means when one particular person or one particular area, if the information is coming in different perspectives, if I am getting information something, if the government is getting information something, if the private sector in the healthcare getting information something, that is information asymmetry. So as to prevent information asymmetry as far as healthcare sector is concerned, now there is a need for healthcare regulator. Please don't forget, as far as healthcare is concerned, around 2/3 of the healthcare needs are met by the private sector. So under these circumstances, there is a need for healthcare regulator. Another important aspect is telemedicine. It is batting for telemedicine so that the rural areas, interior areas can be integrated into the high-end healthcare. Then economic growth has greater impact on poverty alleviation than inequality. Most important point. We deliberated in various lectures. Inequality, rich-poor gap, that is widening. But the economic survey made it a point. Economic growth has greater impact on poverty alleviation. That means when the economy is becoming bigger, that means if the economic growth is increasing, then automatically you can utilize part of those incomes gained through taxation and other means for the alleviation of poverty. That means poverty can be eliminated, poverty can be reduced when economic pie is becoming more and more. Of course, it may not solve the problem of inequality. Rich may become richer, but we can tax the rich, redistribute it to the poor. So the important point to make here is when economic growth is there, that economic growth will have more impact, very valid point, more impact on reducing poverty in comparison to reducing inequalities. So poverty alleviation, poverty eradication, that is possible when we reach $5 trillion economy, $6 trillion economy from at present around $2.7 trillion economy. So economic growth is the most essential point. Redistribution in a developing economy is feasible only if the size of the economic pie grows. If the economic pie grows, you can tax the rich. Now there are voices for reintroducing wealth tax. So friends, first most important aspect in a country like India is we have to look for the economic growth. When the overall GDP becomes bigger, we may not stem the aspect of inequality. Rich-poor gap may widen, but the important aspect is you can redistribute wealth up to certain extent. That means you can tax the rich and you can eradicate poverty, and a certain trickle down may be there if not fully. So friends, this is the valid point made by economic survey. Then growth causes debt to become sustainable in countries with higher growth rates. When the GDP growth rate is high, 8%, 7%, 9%, something like that, you need not bother about debt. Debts will be sustainable if you increase debt, if you increase the fiscal deficit. It should not matter as far as our growth rates are high. When our growth rates are increasing 7%, 8%, 9%, something like that, it should not matter if you burst the fiscal deficit. Fiscal deficits need not be sacrosanct. When the GDP growth potential is expected to be high, you can breach fiscal deficits, you can increase the debts. Debts may not become unsustainable, very important point. Debts may not become unsustainable provided your GDP growth rates are high. So friends, to achieve higher GDP growth rates, you can eye for more debts, or you can say if the debts increase also, you need not bother, you need not fear, provided this debt, these fiscal deficits, these borrowings, if they are leading to higher growth rates, concentrate on growth. 7%, 8%, 9%, something like that. And the economy is becoming bigger, you can eliminate poverty, you can eradicate poverty. At the same time, you can look at the debt sustainability also. If the debt increases, it should not become a problem, provided your GDP growths are huge or high. Then in times of slowdown, this is most important point, there is a need for public investment, and it calls for fiscal policy to support growth. That means there is a need to rethink about fiscal rules. Don't restrict 3.5%, don't restrict 4%, something like that. We are into difficult times because of COVID-19. Borrow money, and government should resort to spending in times of difficulty. Very, very important. In times of difficulty, government can go for more borrowings, and at the same time, it should increase its expenditure. When government expenditure is increased, then it automatically crowds in the private investment. So the present day times calls for increasing the government spending. It should not matter if we borrow more, and as it already pointed out, when we look for higher GDP growths, we need not look at the debt sustainability. Debt will become sustainable provided we go for higher GDP growths. So in the times of this COVID-19, the economic survey talks about or recommends higher government spending, even though it is through market borrowings. But the need of the hour is higher government spending. The advantage is it crowds in private investment, right? The sovereign credit rating methodology needs correction. Friends, in the history of India, India never defaulted on sovereign debt. Most important point, valid point made by the economic survey. In the history of India, India never defaulted as far as sovereign debt is concerned. But why India is getting lower investment grade rating from the international credit rating agencies? International credit rating agencies give lower investment grade rating as far as India is concerned. Why so? We never defaulted. Still, why the credit rating agencies give lowest investment grade rating for India? This is not understood. So therefore, the credit rating methodology needs improvement. Then the economic survey puts the blame on the government for the poor performance of disinvestment. Friends, after reaching the peak of around rupees 1 lakh crore in 2017-18, please listen carefully, after reaching the peak of rupees 1 lakh crore in 2017-18, after that, the disinvestment proceeds for the government are on the declining trend, and this year the situation is abysmally poor, and economic survey blames the government for poor performance of disinvestment. Now the stock market is skyrocketing. Why can't we get better performance as far as disinvestment is concerned? That is being asked in the economic survey. Foreign institutional investors, if you look at foreign institutional investors or foreign portfolio investors, they invested around $30 billion in Indian stocks within 9 months period. Precisely because of that reason, the stock market, in fact, in recent times has reached 50,000. So friends, Sensex reached 50,000, though it has fallen now, but the stock market resurgence after COVID-19 is primarily due to the foreign institutional investors who invested around $30 billion in around 8-9 months or so. The share of agriculture and allied sectors. Friends, in 2019-20, the share of agriculture and allied sectors, that is 14.7%. But in 2021, the share of agriculture and allied sectors is going to increase. Normally, agriculture and allied sectors share that reduces year after year because services sector grows much faster than agriculture, and several times the industry grows much faster than agriculture. Because of these reasons, normally the share of agriculture and allied sectors in the economy, that is on the declining trend. But this year what happened? Agriculture is expected to grow at around 3.4%, whereas services and industry are going to contract by around 8 to 9%. Because of these reasons, now the agriculture and allied sectors share, that is going to increase to 16.3% from 14.7%. This is one prominent change, please don't forget. Then monthly GST collections, they crossed 1.15 lakh crores, right, in December 2020, and it is 12% more than that in December 2019. Friends, this is because of the government, in fact, several measures against GST evaders, then fake bills, along with many systemic changes. Not only that, it is in tune with the fast recovery expected. Then, as on January 1, bank credit growth should be at least around 12 to 15%. Friends, normally the bank credit growth is expected to be 2 to 2.5 times that of the GDP growth. But unfortunately, what happened? Since September 2019, bank credit growth is in single digits. This is cause of worry for the nation. Then, India's gross expenditure on research and development. Friends, research and development expenditure in advanced countries, that is around 3 to 4%, something like that. In our country, it is just 0.65% of GDP. Annual research and development expenditure is 0.65% of GDP, and out of it 56% is coming from the government and remaining from the private sector. Of course, the share of private sector is increasing slightly, the share of the government sector is reducing slightly, and even now also the share of the government sector is 56% of the gross expenditure of research and development. The need of the hour is research and development expenditure, which is at present 0.65% of GDP. That needs improvement urgently. Then, mere reliance on jugaad innovation. India is known for jugaad innovation. That means low cost innovation practices which are prevalent across the country. That means Mitti Cool is one example. That is a type of refrigerator which keeps the things cool without electricity. That is one example of jugaad innovation. Several such jugaad innovations are there in our country, but jugaad innovation that risks missing the crucial opportunity to innovate our way into the future. That means there must be major thrust on research and development by the business sector. You cannot depend on jugaad innovation. We require path-breaking innovation as far as India is concerned. Right, friends? This is an insight or introductory lesson as far as economic survey is concerned. We are going to discuss each one of the topics in detail as we go forward. Please do join for other modules also next week. Friends, we are going to present Union Budget on 2nd February because Union Budget is getting presented on 1st February to the Parliament. Right, friends? Have a nice day. Thank you.